vision or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hi, this is Dick Shanley. For the next hour, I will be reading from Sunday, April 19th, issue of the New York Times opinion section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The GLP-1 revolution is here. In November 2017, on a bike ride to pick up her daughter from daycare in Portland, Oregon, Laurel Schmidt was hit by a car and tossed headfirst over her handlebars. She walked away with a bruised elbow and a headache that over the next few days became excruciating. She was in her mid-30s at the time. Her suffering didn't meaningfully abate for nearly 10 years. Ms. Schmidt was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury and severe post-concussion syndrome with no cure. Frequently dizzy, with her vision impaired and her memory faltering, she felt as though she were living inside a snow globe, she said, constantly shaken up. She no longer trusted herself to cook. Out of fear, she forgot to turn off the stove. She stopped driving after she noticed she couldn't register traffic light changes quickly enough. Most days she hid away in a dark room, seeing her children for only short periods. That was until early 2025, when Ms. Schmidt discovered animal and cell research demonstrating that GLP-Is, the class of medicine that include Ozempic and Wegovy, that's spelled W-E-G-O-V-Y, could treat concussions. She tracked down several researchers involved in the studies, including the Indiana University chemist Richard DeMarchi. He suggested that she ask her doctor about trying GLP-1 drug off-label, a common practice in which a medication is prescribed for use that's not yet formally approved. Within days, starting on Z-Bound in February 25, Ms. Schmidt felt her concussion symptoms finally begin to ease. A former endurance athlete and a methodical tracker of all things, she used the post-concussion symptom scale to assess the severity of her condition. In the weeks after the crash, she scored over 100 of a possible 132, indicating extreme impairment. When I talked to her last autumn, she scored 6. Whoa. On Thanksgiving, she ran a turkey trot with her daughters, her first race since the accident. She described the turnaround to me as miraculous. Like so many other people who are taking these drugs for intractable and varied symptoms, Ms. Schmidt had joined what we might call the Great American GLP-1 experiment. Technology moves fast while science accumulates slowly. Humans have a history of rushing ahead with new technology well before understanding how it affects us. Just think of smartphones and ultra-processed foods. Still, GLP-1 may be a medical first, a blockbuster drug class, enthusiastically taken by millions of people, not for one or for a few uses, but it appears a multitude. They're also the first blockbuster drugs to collide with our wellness-obsessed algorithms age. People online extol introducing GLP-1 as longevity, subreddits, I don't know what that means, I'll spell it for you, SUBREDDITS, subreddits, swap stories about using the medicines for menopause symptoms, fitness influence, promote unapproved formulations for bodybuilding. So much of the experimentation with GLP is happening outside digestional research models, careful clinical trials, and even the health system. Given the immense popularity of these drugs, regulators and the medical establishment need urgently to figure out how to best capture and keep pace with the experiment. Otherwise, it risks spinning out of control. In the past year, I've been talking to GLP patients as well as researchers and physicians who are using or prescribing the drugs for an astounding range of diseases and conditions. Many report success, debilitating long COVID symptoms dissolved, decades of uncomfortable bouts of irritable bowel syndrome relieved. Patients said that the drugs loosened the grip of their addiction to drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, and sex. Still, others reported cognitive benefits like decreased anxiety and brain fog and improved focus. The tenor of these stories surprised me. Times Opinion asked the polling company Morning Consult on surveys over 2,000 adults who have used GLP-1s. Before getting the results, I suspected that the reality of taking the drugs would be messier than the triumphant headlines. The drugs can have unsavory side effects, most frequently nausea. Many people stop taking them because of these side effects and perhaps even more cost and insurance barriers. But the survey respondents were enthusiastic. 65% of current or past GLP users said they were very interested in continuing to take the drugs. More remarkable, 63% said that if their GLP failed to help their condition it was initially prescribed to treat, they would either definitely or probably keep taking it for other benefits. The poll results have limitations as the answers are self-reported, but directionally they suggest that people are finding relief where they hadn't even been looking. The more patient and physicians I've spoken to about this phenomenon, the clearer it has become. We're only at the beginning of the Ozempic era, but is already shaping our culture and changing our disease and understood and treated. An estimate 1 in 8 people in the United States alone has taken GLP, placing the drugs among the most widely prescribed in the country right now. A significant number of those people are experiments with off-label uses like Ms. Schmidt, or remaining on the drugs for unexpected benefits. The experimentation also driven how the drugs seem to cut across familiar borders of illness the way that doctors hadn't seen. What we have come to realize, said Dr. Demarchi, who was vice president at Eli Lilly and involved in the GLP research there till he left the company in 2003, is that many diseases may share the same root causes, even though we label them and treat them as distinct. This is an endocrine disease. This is a cardiovascular disease. This is a brain disease. The root cause theory suggests that a wide range of conditions can be treatable with one drug class, sometimes through pathways in the brain and the immune system. But Dr. Demarchi added, what we know right now is small relative what we don't know. When GLP-1 medicines exploded into the market for weight loss, experts offered a simple theory for how the drugs worked. They act as a souped-up version of a natural gut hormone called GLP-1, which signals satiety. And I think it's S-A-T-I-E-T-Y, satiety. I guess that means being satisfied. The idea was the drug mimics the body's own hormonal signal, but more forcibly, making people feel fuller, faster, eat less, and ultimately lose weight. And it's just not true, said Dr. Randy Seeley, a GLP researcher and director of the University of Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center. The GLP-1 hormone that our bodies produce most in the gut and brain, and to a lesser extent the pancreas, There's almost nothing important physiologically, said Dr. Drucker, a research based in Toronto, whose GLP discoveries helped lay the foundation for today's drugs. GLP-1 is among hundreds of chemical signals circulating in the body, part of the course that shapes our physiology and behavior, rather than a lead star. What makes GLP-1 drugs so powerful is how the hormone behaves when given as medicine. GLP-1 receptors are found all over the body, and when people receive much higher, longer-lasting doses than humans produce naturally, a wide range of benefits surface. In the case of obesity, the weight loss effects don't come from the gut but originate in the brain. The brain has its own GLP-1 signal system which helps guide appetite in ways researchers are just starting to unravel. The importance of native brain GLP-1 is still a bit of a mystery, said Dr. Drucker, who, like Dr. Sigley, consults for GLP drug makers. Natural GLP-1 in the brain doesn't seem to affect appetite much. When artificially raised, however, the brain's GLP system powerfully blunts the urge to eat. Researchers discovered the weight loss effects of GLP in serendipitously. GLP-1 medicines were first approved for treating type 2 diabetes, a disease in which the body can't properly use or doesn't make enough insulin to control blood glucose levels. In 2005, as clinicians tried higher doses in clinical trials for diabetes, they began to notice patients spontaneously losing weight. Unexpected results for kidney and liver disease turn up in the diabetes trials too. The Food and Drug Administration requires drug companies to run studies investigating whether GLP increases the risk of cardiovascular problems, a mandate for all diabetic drugs. These studies have shown a 20% reduction in heart attacks, strokes, and death from cardiovascular problems. GLP is now being prescribed for patients with conditions such as heart disease, sleep apnea, and advanced fatty liver disease. Clinical trials are testing different uses of the medication for everything from treating arthritis to improved survival outcomes for cancer patients. Part of this was predictable. Weight loss has long been known to enhance overall health and reduce risk of everything from certain cancers to diabetes and cardiovascular problems. Since the drug helped people lose weight, it wasn't surprised that they would deliver additional health gains. But what surprises everyone is how many benefits are weight independent, said Dr. Seeley in recent studies. The health gains, cardiovascular, liver, and kidney disease, for example, happen regardless of whether patients lose weight. Explaining why GLP-1 drugs improve health without weight loss defies simple narratives and confounds researchers. I've never come across another medical story in which scientists repeatedly apologize for how bewildering their results appear to be. For each one of these effects they dig into, they come to different explanations for how the drug helped In some cases, GLP-1 has seemed to target the organs involved in disease directly, making healthier. In either case, the drugs help the body handle blood sugar and fat, making people more metabolically flexible and biochemically more youthful, said Dr. Marcy. Editorial comment on a personal note. I was given Ozempic for diabetes, but it didn't work for me. One of the most mysterious, fascinating ways they work is through reducing inflammation. Inflammation is part of the body's natural response to injury and infection. It can signal healing, but it can be present and harmful in the context of chronic disease. Dr. Drucker's lab at the University of Toronto has pivoted from studying chronic disease like diabetes and obesity to unraveling the immune system effects of GLP-1. We realized very quickly one underlying theme of these inflammation is said of the diseases. Before GLP is medicine that target inflammation like steroids work by shutting it down, suppressing the immune system and making patients more vulnerable to infection and cancer. The effects of GLP appears to be more subtle. Researchers told me to believe that drugs tamper or fine-tune the immune response without the sledgehammer effect of steroids. One called that a new frontier in medicine. Dr. Drucker has found that the cells in the gut that produce GLP seem to detect pathogens, releasing the hormones as part of the body's response to injury or infection. The drugs may harness that effect, but even the anti-inflammatory narrative of how GLP drugs work is complicated, depending on the type and location of inflammation. We should not assume, as many do, that there is one simple way the drug lowers inflammation in all organs and conditions, Dr. Drucker said. In Ms. Schmidt's case, Dr. DeMarcy suspects that the GLP-1 might have reduced damage, inflammation, in her brain from the post-concussion syndrome, which played a role in her turnaround. There's incredible promise here, said DeMarcy, who thinks there should be human trials testing GLP for concussion, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The momentum may be hard to rein in. They're moving especially fast, and pill version of GLP-1 drugs are now on the market. Patients, doctors, and researchers are making observations about a range of new potential uses. Some of these benefits may eventually pan out in clinical trials, but others won't. There's already have been notable disappointment and claims that the drug caused serious side effects. There are numerous lawsuits from people against companies blaming that GLP is for health complications like serious stomach problems and alleging that they weren't properly warned of potential risk. In November of 2025, the drug maker Novo Nordisk announced that the two large and much anticipated studies failed to find any benefit in its GLP medicine in patients with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Studies of Parkinson's disease and cognitive impairment, major depression have also fallen short. It could be that researchers just haven't figured out the right combination of GLP-1 based molecules, or it could be that the drug won't work well enough for these conditions. Even the most riveting stories people have shared of their experience suggesting that GLP-1 can curb addiction gave many of the researchers interviewed pause. The trials to date have been mixed, and some experts wondered if the effects people initially reported will persist. Health institutions figure out how to harness the data the great GLP-1 experiment is yielding. Publicly funded research agencies like National Institutes of Health could play an important role by rapidly investigating the most promising uses of GLP-1, particularly in areas where pharmaceutical companies may be reluctant to invest, such as traumatic brain injury, for which trials are difficult to run. If done well, more people might find life-altering relief and others could be spared harm. Right now, the potential for injury and misuse is high. Many people report getting GLP is through online telemedicine companies, where doctors are required to evaluate and prescribe the drug, but barriers to entry can be too low. The telehealth company HIMS, H-I-M-S, which has sold branded and compounded GLP, recently announced it plans to offer a cheaper pill form the GLP-1. The company quickly had to backpedal among legal action from Novo Nordisk. There's just so much medicine happening outside the actual medical system, said Dr. Beverly Chang, an assistant professor of clinical medicine at Wells Cornell, who works as an advisor for the telehealth company Ro. It's happening within these telehealth companies, within the internet, over the gray market, and no one has any insight in it. Meanwhile, insurance barriers have helped fuel markets for unregulated GLP-1s, including for cheaper compound versions of the drugs, medications that are custom mixed for clinical brand drugs. The patients who mostly benefit from GLP is for obesity and diabetes, among low-income, structurally disadvantaged groups in which diet-related diseases are concentrated, often can get access to them. The medicine is largely not covered by insurance for anything but approved uses. And even among insured, gaining coverage for weight loss remains challenging. One patient I spoke to had been using compounded GLP to manage her lupus symptoms because of cost issues, and was increasing her dose without consulting her doctor whenever she felt its effects plateau. The case for cost savings to the public pure is also murky. For diabetes and obesity, the benefits of GLP depends on long-term use. When people stop taking the medicine, their weight and health risk often rebounds. Given the scales of current spending on these drugs, that relapse can feel like money thrown away. I asked Dr. Seeley and Drucker, given the drug's anti-inflammatory effects and the range of positive research, we should all be on the GLPs. The answer is an unambiguous no. I'm not a GLP-1 in the thinking what kind of guy, doctor said. A lot of what we know about the drugs so far comes from data in people with diabetes and obesity, Dr. Seeley pointed out. Not healthy people trying to do things like manage menopause or symptoms of microdose to extend their lifespans. Much of the long-term safety data also comes from early versions of the drugs. Never formulations that target multiple GLP receptors are gaining widespread fervor online and may be even more effective for issues like weight loss, but we have limited data on their long-term risk. Finding ways to better study GLP users, going alone is a place to start. Many of the patients I spoke to were eager to understand results, including Mrs. Schmidt. Traumatic brain injuries can shorten lifespans, she told me, and increase the risk of dementia. When she started documenting her symptoms, she said it was in the hopes that someone someday would study this more. For now, she wasn't sure why medication worked for her or how long she would take it. She just hoped for a long and healthy life. What does the future look like? I don't know. Maureen Dowd writes this article, "The Pope Bedevils Trump." I might have to go back to church. My mom always told me that the Catholic Church was greater than the men manning it. But I grew so disillusioned with the men running it when I was covering the sex abuse scandal that I could no longer stomach going to Mass. The church that had helped form my sense of right and wrong as a child suddenly seemed blind about right and wrong. But Pope Leo XIV, or Pope Bob, as the first American pope, is sometimes affectionately called, may win me over. President Trump has been rampaging about the globe like Grundle at dinner time, a rapacious feral creature. Who could stand up to him? The soft-spoken, humble Leo, who strives to unify, squared off against the bombastic, solipsistic Trump. I saw that word, editorial comment, I saw that word in another article last week, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's solipsistic, solipsistic, who strives to divide, and watching the saintly Pope school the immoral president is a blessed sight. I'm sure His Holiness watched the accounts as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth cast the conflict with Iran as a holy war, trying to put God on the American side as our troops are asked to rain the death and destruction from above on apocalyptic Iranian foes. In March, Hegseth called for overwhelming violence of action against those that deserve no mercy, asking God to break the teeth of the ungodly. This week he recalled a passage that was his adaptation of a Quentin Tarantino Pulp Fiction of a biblical passage, and I will strike down upon with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to capture and destroy my brother. He also denounced the press as the Pharisees, plotting to harm the Trump administration the same way the Pharisees plotted to harm Jesus. George Bush had to walk back his use of the words crusade in reference to the war on terror, given the offensive echo of papacy's crusaders wiping out Muslims in the Holy Land. But Hegseth is no historian. His book is called American Crusade. He carries a Crusader Bible, known for violent pictures of early Christian wars. He is tattooed with a Crusader cross and the words Deus Vult, Latin for God wills it. During Easter week, the Pope seemed to chide Hegseth, saying that the Christian mission has often been distorted by a desire for domination, entirely foreign to the way of Jesus Christ. On Easter Sunday, Trump blasted out one of his assorted treats to destroy Iranian civilization, crudely appending the phrase, "Praise be to Allah." Leo called the essential extortion truly unacceptable, a transgression against moral law. Trump escalated. He posted a meme of himself as a Jesus-like figure healing a sick man, and he attacked the Holy Father on social media with sinful aspirations, saying the Pope is weak on crime. And I don't want a Pope who thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Leo, who's Chicago tough, hasn't backed down, and next he said, God does not bless any conflict. Anyone who is a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once yielded the sword and today drop bombs. He reminded the authoritarian, strange Lovian president that he should be promoting peace through dialogue, and multilateralism. Too many people are suffering today. Too many innocent people have been killed, Leo told reporters. And I believe someone wants to stand up and say that there is a better way. J.D. Vance, a fairly recent convert to Catholicism, dutifully jumped into the fray to try to brush back the Pope and butter up Trump, lecturing Leo to be careful when he talks about matters of theology and yapping about the tradition of just war theory. When you're down in the weeds about whether it's not just a war or not, the answer is probably not. In a puerile fit of apparent retribution on Thursday, Trump canceled an $11 million federal grant when Catholic Charities in Miami to house and feed migrant children coming to America. Even my Trump-indulging sister found that disgusting. It's hard for the president to give the Pope the respect that he deserves because Trump clearly thinks that he is the Messiah. Right before Leo was elected, Trump put out a meme of himself as the Pope. He struts and peacocks, play acting as everything, a king, a pope, Jesus. But the president should read the Grumman's fairy tale about the poor man in a hovel who caught a magic fish. His wife pestered the man to ask for a bigger house, then a mansion, then to be king, then emperor, then pope. The fish granted all of these wishes, but when the wife coveted even more and told the man to wish her to the equal of God, the fish cast them back into their hovel. It is dangerous to play God unless you're God. An editorial comment: no matter what your political beliefs, what Trump did to the Pope is immoral. All right. Trump's second term is a cautionary tale. Above and at home, the president isn't over his head. This is written by Jamil Bowie. To have spent amount of time observing President Trump over the last month is to conclude that he is far over his head. The president is struggling with the consequence of his actions, raging in protest of the fact that for all its firepower, the United States cannot bomb Iran into submission. When Trump launched a short-term excursion, he assumed that it would be, in the words of Pentagon official, in the last Republican administration to launch a Middle East war, a cakewalk. That, as Trump's own intelligence agency told him, was a mistake. Now he is stuck, and he lacks the skill and patience to find a way out of his self-inflicted catastrophe. Unable to will a better outcome into existence, there are limits to the power of positive thinking. And frustrated by his own impotence, his response, familiar to anyone who must manage the emotions of a young child, is to throw a tantrum. In recent days, Trump denounced the fake news media as crazy or just plain corrupt for its reporting on the war. He attacked Pope Leo XIV in a bizarre rant, called him weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. And he posted an AI image of himself as Jesus, surrounded by devotees, healing an unnamed man. This is not a man in control of himself or a president in control of the situations around him. I've written before about the irony of a strongman president so uninterested in governing that he has handed the power over to a handful of deputies. Trump's behavior as he faces failure in Iran underscores another such irony. Months before Trump won his second term and well before he took office, the Supreme Court handed him the reins of a unitary executive, the promise of an active, energetic administration free of what the court deemed unnecessary constraints. The president used his power to run wild, trampling over constitutional government. but he has also at the time shown himself to be the weakest and most ineffectual president of recent memory. Less a man of commanding authority than, well, a buffoon. This is not to say that Trump has been an inconsequential president. He hasn't presided over the wholesale destruction of large parts of the federal government, or that he hasn't turned the sharp edge of the state against the most vulnerable people in the country. First, under the Department of Government Efficiency, and now under the direction of Russell Vought, Director of the Office of Management and Budget, the administration summarily liquidated several key agencies, among them the Consumer Protection Agency, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the United States Institute of Peace, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Trump's White House has also slashed hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funding for new medicines and technologies, in a crushing blow to scientific research in the United States. Under the direction of Stephen Miller, a White House Deputy Chief of Staff, and the architect of the President's deportation program, the administration has used its court-sanctioned authority to build a roving secret police of the armed immigration agency, used both to terrorize the President's political enemies and to remove as many immigrants from the country as possible, regardless of legal status. But these grim facts of Trump's tenure should not blind us to the way his unilateral action betrays the weakness of his regime. Excuse me. Trump works almost exclusively through executive orders, presidential directives used to shape the priorities of the federal bureaucracy. This allows him to move quickly, but there are also limits in his reach. In areas where Trump cannot compel political actors to obey his demands, where there is no legal basis for his authority, he struggles to do anything of consequence. Consider his effort to impose a new citizenship requirement for voting, as well as a national voter ID. He has issued 2 executive orders that purport to change federal elections to suit his demands, but neither has much in the way of legal force. Presidential power does not exist to election administration. This is the SAVE Act, a bill that would write these restrictions into law. But other than writing posts on his social media, Trump has done little to nothing to push that bill through Congress. He has done little to do nothing with Congress, period. He's taken a few, if any, steps to work with the supine Republican majority to consolidate his transformation of the executive branch through legislation. Some of this is no doubt strategy with destruction of fait accompli, but most of it reflects the inability to enrage the legislative process. The weakness we see abroad is the weakness we see at home, and vice versa. Politically, the president's unilateralism has been a disaster. His universal tariffs, a vanity project as much as an economic program, are dragging both the economy and his approval rating. The same goes for the immigration policies, which all started with a broad assertion of executive authority. Then they produced an enormous backlash from Americans under siege by ICE and Customs and Border Protection. The resistance in Minnesota in particular underscored the extent to which the president cannot withstand significant pushback, and it ultimately forced him to fire his Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, sideline the face of the efforts, Greg Bovino, and execute a strategic retreat. Nothing underscores Trump's weakness as an executive more than the war with Iran. This is not to downplay the president's decision to circumvent Congress. and start a war without so much as a nod to democratic decision-making. It is the imperial project of would-be authoritarian. But like many such projects throughout history, it is a showcase for the pathologist and dysfunctional of the regime in question. Initial operation success has given way to what is essentially a stalemate, with Trump screaming at the world, unwilling to do much less. To do much less. I'm sorry. To do much else. For as much as Trump is uniquely unsuited for the tremendous power of his office, it is also true that the idea of the unitary executive rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of the American political system. It imagines that government be managed by a single figure, directing each part of the executive branch as an extension of its person. But the American system rests on consensus and collaboration, depends on an active relationship among the three branches, each working to steer the affairs of a state, and each entitled to its influence. As weak as Trump is, it's not clear that any president could unilaterally govern the country with any success. Even our strongest and most aggressive presidents, Franklin Roosevelt comes to mind, worked in conjunction and cooperation with congressional majorities and allies within and outside the federal government. They understood that American government was a partnership, and that collaboration is necessary if one wants a durable and lasting legacy. This raises what is really the most important question that Trump years thus far. Will his legacy be durable and lasting? Does it represent a new template for American government going forward? Or is it more like an unfortunate detour into a dark alley? There is a decent chance that Trump is the beginning of something and not the end. But if we can escape these years intact and respond accordingly, we may find that Trump stands less as an example and more as a cautionary tale of what happens when we embrace unaccountable, unilateral authority. In the end, it just doesn't work. Trump escalated. He posted a meme of himself. I'm sorry. That ends that. In the end, it just doesn't work. Oil companies want what gun manufacturers have. The fossil fuel industry seeks to settle the public with costs of climate change. As far back as 1970, some of the world's largest oil corporations were aware that burning their products could have potential catastrophic consequences. But they withheld the evidence, carried out a decade-long campaign that misled the public about climate science, and fought the transition to cleaner and cheaper energy sources. Eventually, scientists and activists took oil and gas companies to court to try to get them to pay for their deceptive campaign and the potential trillions of dollars in damages from disasters made worse by a climate warmed by their products. Now, the fossil fuel industry has mounted a carefully orchestrated campaign to stop these cases. Backed by the Trump administration, the industry is seeking to block all climate lawsuits that seek compensation from fossil fuel producers for damages. Last month, Utah became the first state to enact a law that shields companies from such climate-related claims. And Republican lawmakers have introduced similar bills in Iowa, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. But the biggest prize the industry is after would come from Congress: total legal immunity from liability in climate cases. sad comment, but it seems money is always king. Think back of the cigarette business. Cigarette manufacturers knew that it was bad for people, but they were more interested in making money. They didn't care about the adverse health effects. I guess it's the same for the oil companies. The question of whether the industry can be held accountable for the damage from climate change is coming to a head, in part because at the end of February, following the urging of the Trump administration and over 100 House Republicans, the Supreme Court announced it would hear arguments about whether the industry can be sued under state law over its role in global warming. The industry has asked the court to dismiss the Colorado Supreme Court decision that allowed a lawsuit filed by Boulder and Boulder County to proceed in that case. The city and county wanted ExxonMobil and Suncor Energy to pay for climate damage like that from the 2021 Marshall Fire, which destroyed more than 1,000 homes. How the Supreme Court rules should have profound implications for dozens of other states and municipalities seeking similar recourse against oil companies. But the Supreme Court is not where the industry's efforts to evade accountability end. Oil and gas companies have also been lobbying Congress for a legal shield that will block communities from trying to hold them responsible for climate-linked damage. And last week, a Republican House member from Wyoming introduced legislation to establish such a shield. More than a year ago, oil company executives reported as President Trump to help them quash the rising number of climate lawsuits and climate superfund laws that state and local governments had advanced. Trump administration responded by suing New York and Vermont to block enforcement of the nation's first two climate superfund laws, and suing Michigan and Hawaii to prevent them from bringing their own climate cases against big oil. A federal judge already dismissed the administration's lawsuit against Michigan, and the states have moved forward with their cases undeterred. States like New York, Rhode Island, Hawaii, and California are also considering bills to make oil companies pay for climate change's contribution to rising insurance costs. California is pressing forward with a lawsuit over ExxonMobil's alleged role in plastic pollution. And the daughter of a woman killed in the 2021 heat dome in the Pacific Northwest filed the first ever wrongful death suit against oil companies linked to climate change. A Supreme Court ruling in favor of the oil company at the Boulder case will probably not make all the legal threats against big oil go away, but a sweeping liability waiver from Congress could, and we'd all be worse for it. In addition to food, rent, and housing, costs from climate disasters are growing at a frightening pace. Now nearly $1 trillion a year by some estimates. And right now, everyday Americans are the ones picking up the tab. Governments are struggling with the growing cost of rebuilding communities and infrastructures like roads, water, sewer systems after extreme weather. Their budgets often can't cover these costs, and there is pressure to raise taxes and fees. Disaster costs are also making home insurance increasingly unavailable and unassurable. A phenomenon I saw firsthand during my time as California Insurance Company's commissioner. Some politicians may pretend that climate change isn't real, but insurance rates don't lie, and some of the states' home insurance premiums are projected to continue to rise as insurance growing financial losses from previously unthinkable climate disasters get passed on to policy holders. It is rare for Congress to grant liability waivers to entire industries, and it should be. 2005 Protection of Lawful Commerce that has shielded gun manufacturers from nearly all legal accountability is now widely regarded as terrible public policy that has fueled gun-related deaths in this country. Yet, Republican state attorneys general had proposed using the exact law as a model for protecting fossil fuel companies. If big oil were to secure immunity from liability for climate change, the public would keep paying for the cost of climate change, while the fossil fuel companies most responsible for them would continue to pay nothing. As climate disasters mount and the Trump administration slashes federal disaster response, the most important thing members of Congress can do is to protect their constituents' ability to make polluters pay. You can't game your way to real education. Every part of the argument for bringing technology to the classroom is wrong. This is written by Molly Worthen, who's professor of history at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Paige Drygas, who teaches high school English at a private school just north of Dallas, feels no pressure to make learning fun. She distinguishes between fun, meaning stress-free amusement, and the burden she feels to get students engaged as much as possible. I can see it in their eye contact, she told me. I'm trying to get their minds going. For example, I don't think many people would describe Emerson and Thoreau as fun. Maybe that's why some teachers have their students play Walden, a video game in which players simulated Thoreau's solitary sojourn at Walden Pond. The game is free for teachers, but Ms. Drygas sticks to the text. The idea of self-reliance really interesting. Once you engage that big idea, that moves quickly. Ms. Drygas is not only a fun skeptic, she also requires her students to handwrite their essays, read books in hard copy, use laptops little as possible. These countercultural classroom policies all go together because fun used to be a wonderful thing in school. The screens came to dominate instruction time, and software developers, for me, history came alive through the homemade costumes of medieval times. For a fair in high school, especially the memorable sensory activity of trying to make my project look really medieval by soaking in tea and browning it in the oven where it caught fire. I then spent hours recreating it. My quest to simulate ancient vellum may have been a little eccentric, but my basic mental wiring wasn't. The concept of a digital native is a myth. The advent of iPhones and laptops did not undo eons of brain evolution in the space of a few years. Even expensive screen time is associated with the thinning of the cerebral cortex. The damage appears to be reversible thanks to the brain's plasticity. People are mistaking kids' preference for deep biological reality. Gerald Cooney Hovarth, a neuroscientist who consults with schools on digital policy, told me, "My daughter loves popsicles. I have a choice. I could meet her where she's at and start every meal with a popsicle. But that doesn't change the fact that biologically popsicles aren't good for her, and she needs some vegetables." In his new book, The Digital Delusion, Dr. Horvath surveys the vast body of research demonstrating the damage to learning that comes with overuse of so-called edtech, the massive digital devices and soft and quizzes, carbon stars, and bursts of animated confetti to keep up your streak and earn new rewards. Dennis Champney is a speech pathologist in Rhode Island. who has worked in public schools for 20 years, mainly with neurodivergent learners. The persuasive design of computer games is meant to keep kids using, with no interaction with other people, just a screen, she told me. I've seen it with iReady Math. They're just clicking. They want to get through it. They are not reading because they don't really need to read. They say, I kind of know that they're asking me, so I'll click what I think the answer is. The overuse of online games and screen-based technology in general may be especially harmful to students with ADHD and autism. These students master narrow pattern recognition instead of working on the skills they need, like reading, writing, and multisensory argument. Multiplayer games do not necessarily encourage healthy and social skills. In the spring, the principal of McPherson Middle School in central Kansas recalled the day of school 2 years ago when an all-grade airline rocket paper scissors tournament developed in Lord of the Flies. I don't think I've seen anything so much cheating. Her school made headlines this year by abandoning the one top laptop. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of text and vision is the widespread adoption of video game style apps to teach, assess, and entertain students. These apps feed broader ethos of gamification that encourages students to fixate on points, badges, other digital dopamine hits. It's a new word. D-O-P-A-M-I-N-E. Dopamine. And shy away from the experimentation, frustration struggles that real learning demands. The problem is not games themselves. Good teachers have always used games to motivate students, but over the past 15 years ago, the hubbub of active analog games had given way to far quieter classrooms where students spent significant blocks of time in headphones, swiping and scrolling through on-screen activities. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from Sunday, April 19th issue of the New York Times Opinion section. We read from the New York Times Opinion section every Sunday at 2 p.m. Your reader has been Dick Shanley, and thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, followed at 4 by a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Please stay for these readings and more throughout the day, and feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, with any questions you may have. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading